everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to be making a really gorgeous, small, structured bag that I think is perfect for this holiday season. Today, we're making the Jean Mini Vertical Tote, and this comes to us from Miss Freckles Designs. Now, this bag has the cutest little shape. Now, you can see it has a couple little handles. It also has a crossbody option. You can easily take off the crossbody if you'd like and just have it as like a little tiny pouch, which is just gorgeous. It has a main front panel and a main back panel, but the sides and the bottom are actually all one panel. And the way you construct this kind of reminds me of like a French seam, but you're going to sew all this together in a very unique way that you might not have done before. You can see we have this beautiful accent flap right here. I'm using a magnetic snap for that. And then when you open it up, you have a slip pocket and you just have a basic lining on the inside. Now, this pattern had some brand new to me techniques and I absolutely love how it comes together. It is a very structured bag. If you are participating in the monthly bag making bee club box, this is the kit for the month of October. You can see it is influenced heavily by one of my favorite Disney villains. You can go ahead and guess who that is down in the comments. It's not a hard guess once you see all the material. But the material we are using in this month's bee box is very structured. So it is actually a wax canvas. This black and this purple are both wax canvas, and then the lining is a water resistant canvas. The wax canvas though is a very structured wax canvas, which means we need no interfacing, we need no stabilizer. Stabilizer is kind of the name of the game with this pattern right here because you do want this to be super structured in the end, but you have to be careful about not getting it too much in the seams. Because of the material we're using, it already has a very stiff structure to it, but it is still workable, it is still malleable because it is a wax canvas, which means once it's cool, it's very structured, but once it's warm, it's easy to work with. So my top tip when you're working with this specific material is if you're struggling, if it's fighting you, warm it up. Either warm it up with your hands, just kind of start massaging it, kind of like clay, or you can just grab a hairdryer and just hit it with a hairdryer and it will warm it up nicely and make it a lot easier to work with. But I gotta be honest, I absolutely love this adorable little bag. Now the strap I did on this was influenced by another tutorial and I'll have a link for it down below and I'll have like a little timestamp for that strap. Today in the video, we're gonna make a basic strap using just water resistant canvas, but you guys, if you've seen one of my other videos, you saw that I love this type of strap. It just looks so good. And if you have the October kit, you have definitely enough material to actually make 2 of these. You just will have to get different hardware, but the material wise, you have a lot. So you can mix this up however you'd like. If you wanna put the water resistant canvas on the outside, if you wanna use the black around the edge, you can have a lot of fun with creating this bag with your own design. So thank you so much to Miss Freckle Design for allowing me to use your patterns on my channel. Miss Freckle Design has some of the most classic bags. I mean, seriously, we've done wallets, we've done bags, just really classic, beautiful shapes. Go look at the picture and the pattern for this specific bag. It is absolutely stunning. I'm really excited to try this bag again with like a quilt cotton, maybe like a faux leather as well. You could have a lot of fun with this shape and it comes together surprisingly fast. Thank you also to the Bag Making Bee Club for sponsoring today's video. If you're interested in joining this monthly club, I will have a link down below. It is very, very fun. I would say it is a more advanced beginner intermediate level subscription box. We do have more curves. We do deal more with thicker seams, things like that. So if you're looking to kind of up your sewing game a little bit when it comes to the bags, check out the monthly box. It's a really fun one. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout-outs, anything at all, leave it down in the comment section. If you see another pattern from Miss Freckles, leave it down in the comment section. You guys know I absolutely love this pattern designer so much. All right, guys, let's get started. So for this, you're gonna need about 1/4 yard or a fat quarter of exterior material. And then you're gonna need about 1/2 yard of contrast material. Now, the material we're using in the box is a wax canvas, but it is a very, very stiff wax canvas, but I don't want that to scare you because even though it is stiff, as it warms up, it's very easy to work with. But as it cools down, it stiffens up again, which means we don't have to have any sort of a stiff stabilizer here. The material acts as the stabilizer, but it also works really well with this bag. And then you're gonna need about 1/2 yard of interior fabric. For that, we are using a water resistant canvas, which is this beautiful, fun design. You know the inspiration for this. It's just a little pop of inspiration from one of my favorite villains. But this is going to be the lining. Again, you can use whatever you want for the lining. You could definitely use quilt cotton as well. And you can use any quilt cotton or any type of material for the exterior as well. Just make sure that if you are using a lightweight material, you do have to use the stabilizer. This is what I'm using today. I don't need any interfacing and I don't need any stabilizer. This bag is gonna hold its structure really well with this material. So for the hardware today, we have this really fun magnetic snap. Now this is like a design magnetic snap. It's so cool. I've never used one of these before until I practiced making this bag, and I'm really excited to show you. It is a little large for the flap, but it does fit just right. So I'm going to show you how to align that to make sure it's perfectly centered. And then we have a couple of 1/2-inch D-rings, and then we have 2 swivel hooks and a slider. We're going to be using 3/4 inch hardware today for the strap, and then we have a couple of rivets. And as always, a really fun little bag tag. And again, the inspiration for this, you guys should be able to tell, it says the boss is on a roll. This is a fun little accent. You can add this on the exterior or the lining. I usually like to put these little fun ones in the lining. So here's all the other stuff. First, I have a rivet press and a hole punch because I will be using rivets. And this is also going to help with the installation, well, at least the hole punch is going to help with the installation of that fun little accent snap. Then I have some Beacon 3-in-1 glue, a lighter as always to clean up edges. For my thread, my top thread, which is going to go through the needle, I have a Tex 45 weight thread. And then for the bobbin, I'm actually using this Mara 100 weight thread. Remember that your bobbin thread will show on the exterior of this bag. We do have some top stitching along the sides, so if you have a crazy color that you don't want showing at all, make sure you switch out your bobbin thread right now. I have 2 sets of needles here. I have a Microtex 8012 and then a Microtex 9014. Because of the stiffness of the material, some of these seams can become very bulky, and if you get a little nervous, just switch out to a thicker needle. Even a jeans needle will be fine. So initial construction, as we're putting it all together, an 8012 works perfect. As we get towards the end and we're really sewing down some of these thick corners, bumping it up to a 9014 is probably what I'm going to end up doing. And then I have a 1-inch by 6-inch ruler as always. I have a silver ink pen, a chalk pen, a stiletto, and a seam ripper over here. And then I have a set of screwdrivers, again, for the installation of that magnetic snap. So now let's go through all the pattern pieces. First, we have the exterior main panel, which are going to be my black panels here. And then we have the interior open pocket panel, which is a lining cut. Again, I'm not using any stabilizer and I'm not using any woven interfacing because it's not necessary. You have so much material in this box this month, if you went for the box, that you can mix this up however you want. If you want to use the purple here, use the black on the other side. You can mix this up so many different ways. I will tell you that I'm actually making 2 bags using just the material from 1 kit. So you have a lot of material here to customize this however. I mean, you can make this the exterior if you want. That would look amazing. So for me, though, I'm going to stick with my original design, though, with the black as the front and the back panel, and then this will be my pocket panel inside. Next up, we have 2 interior main panels. You will notice these are shorter than the exterior main panels. It's supposed to be, it's the design. You're going to have 2 cuts of this, and this is just the lining material. Next, we have the exterior base panel, and this is actually like the base and sides of the bag. This is your contrasting material, so this can be a pop of whatever you want it to be. It's a really, really fun design. So I just have 1 cut of this, again, using that very nice, firm wax canvas. Then we have our interior base panel. It is a different size than the exterior base panel, so make sure you do notice that. Don't cut 2 exterior base panels with interior and exterior material. This is going to be your lining material. Then you'll have 2 cuts of whatever material you want, but I'm going to be using the contrast material, and this is going to be for the handles. The one pattern piece you do want to print out from the pattern is the flap panel. So we have 2 cuts of this. Now this is a rounded panel. If you did want to make them just rectangles, if you felt like that would be a little bit easier, you can do that, but I'm going to show you how to create this flap. It's a different type of construction than we're used to for the flap. I'm going to show you how to do that. So you're going to need 2 cuts of, I'm going to be using contrast material for that. Something firm though, I wouldn't use the water resistant canvas for this flap. Next up, we have the Crossbody Strap connector panel and then the Crossbody Strap. Now, I did change the measurements of these a little bit. For the connector panels, I did change the width to 1 inch wide. So I changed that, so that way it would fit with the 1/2-inch D-ring. The hardware requirements in this pattern are not hardware that we have, so we had to make a couple of adjustments. And then since my strap is going to be 3/4 of an inch wide, my strap panel here is actually 3 inches wide, so that when I double fold it, it'll turn out as a 3/4 inch strap. So if you have to add any interfacing or stabilizer, go ahead and do that per the pattern instructions. If you're using the material from the box, we don't have to worry about that. So we're just going to go and start with our handles. So grab both of your handle pieces. So on the wrong side of your handle pieces, I took a small ruler and I just etched with my stiletto a 3/8 of an inch line along both long edges. And because of this wax canvas, by doing that, what it actually does is it creates like a little crease. So it's really easy for me to just fold right on that marked line. So I'm just going to fold this wrong sides together along all 4 of these long raw edges. And once you have those long edges folded back, now you're just going to fold the entire strap wrong sides together, lining up those folded long edges. and just fold it in half. The nice thing about this material is when you fold it, it just stays. You don't have to glue it, iron it, nothing like that. It just stays how you want it. So do this for both of your straps. So now we're going to sew around all 4 edges of each strap at a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, once you have those top stitched, now you're going to take a marking tool, so I just use my little stiletto to scrape this. You're going to measure in 2 3/4 of an inch from each short edge and mark a little vertical line. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fold this in half again. And I know if you're using this material, you're like, what? It's okay. You're going to be okay. So you're going to fold this in half again, but just between those 2 marks. So just like that. Make sure the folded edges are lined up. So do this for both of your handles. And now you're going to take your handles and you're going to top stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the folded edge and along these double folded edges, and only between these marks. You can just top stitch right over those marks. And you're going to do this for both of your handles. So the edges here, the short edges, stay unsewn. All right, so once you have them sewn, you should have something like this where the ends kind of go out like that, and then in the middle part, it's sewn. As you can see, I left all the threads very long. I like to do that because I like to pull all threads to one side. So for example, I'm going to look on the back side here, and I'm just going to tug on my bobbin threads. And then I'll grab my stiletto and just pull the top threads to the same side as the bobbins. And then I just take those threads and tie them in like a triple knot. Nice and close to the material, nice and tight. And then cut down the threads. And then I'll just grab a lighter and very, very gently just melt down the little ends of the threads. So I'm not melting down the knot, just the little ends. And that way it's nice and tucked in there, and it looks nice and clean from both sides. So I'm going to do that for both of these straps. And there you go. Your handles are all ready to go. You can put these to the side. So now grab your 2 flap panels. And what I did was I actually just cut out the outer part of the flap template so that I have this inner part here, and I centered that on the back side of my flap panels, and I used my stiletto to trace this. Because what we want is we want to fold these back at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Again, because of the material I'm using, by tracing with a stiletto, it creates like a little indent on it, so I can easily just fold right along that line. Now, for the rounded bits here, you do want to cut little slits into the seam allowance, so use the line that you can see around the corners so you know how far to go. You don't want to go all the way up to meet that line. Just get kind of close to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold back the sides and then the rounded bottoms. So sides over here, and then just gently go around and fold this back. Now the nice thing about this wax canvas is that it's almost like clay. So like as you warm it up with your fingers, it becomes very malleable, and you can just kind of mush it into the shape you want it to. It's not going to fight you. You don't have to worry about ironing it or taping it or anything like that. You just push it how you want it. And you can open it back up and change it around however you like. So I'm just kind of like again, it just reminds me of playing with clay. I'm just kind of mushing it around this bottom edge over here to get it the shape I want it to be. And there we go. And I know normally what we would do, we would take these 2 pieces right sides together, sew along the sides, then turn it right side out. That would be very difficult to do with this material specifically. And this is, you know, even the pattern suggests doing it this way. So it's a nice thing to give a try. If you're worried about this curved edge here, just make it a rectangle. You can just make it a rectangle and be done with it. So I'm going to repeat that with the other side of the flap panel. Okay, so once you have these done, just line them up, wrong sides together, and make sure they look good around the rounded bits. So if you have to readjust either one of them, go ahead and do that. This just takes a little bit of time. So again, patience, 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 patience. But as you see, as you warm it up more with your fingers, you can really just mush it. I mean, I love that. So make sure they're lined up the way I want them to be lined up. There we go. And if you were using like a quilt cotton or something, you would want to use some fabric glue to help hold down all these bits. But see, this is the back side of them. You see how you just smush it down and it stays. I love this material. I really do. forgot to mention the clover clips and the materials, but as always, we have lots of clips. So I'm gonna pull these two flaps together, wrong sides together, and I'm gonna use clips to line them up and hold them together. All right, once you have this clip together, let's top stitch along all the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're gonna work on installing our magnetic snap. Now this thing is so cool. So you'll see this, it just fits. It's a tight fit. So you can have this design however you want. If you want it to go like this, if you want the little shell to look like this, if you want the shell to go like this, decide the layout you want for it. I might have it go like this time because it is a different design, but you'll notice on the back that the prongs for this are not exactly centered on the design. So I'm going to walk you through how we handle that. So first thing we want to do is remove all the little screws. When I do that, I like to just put them in the lid of my screwdriver case because I will lose them. And we're going to use our washer for this. So first thing we want to do, again, figure out how you want this to go. I think I'm going to have it go just like that. And so I'm going to use my washer, and I'm going to lay my washer over the bottom edge of my flap. And so the things I'm interested in are these 3 holes for the screws, and then also the marking for the magnetic snap. So for that, I'm going to use a silver ink pen to make sure I can see it. And I'm going to mark the 3 holes. And I'm also going to mark the information for the magnetic snap. So center dot and the little slits. There we go. Now you'll notice on the back of the pretty part of this little magnetic snap holder, you have these 3 prongs that stick out. We want those 3 prongs to actually go through the material at those 3 dots that we marked and the little triangle. So what I like to do is grab my hole punch and I kind of twist this around and try to see which one of these sizes will go over and around these prongs. So it needs to wrap around it. For me, that tends to be the biggest one on here. So I'm just gonna go all the way around. So this one here is the largest one, and you can see I can actually fit those little screw holes that stick out. I can fit it in there. So that's the one I wanna use to punch out the holes, because again, I want these to go through the material. So I'm gonna punch out at each of those hole marks. Now this is not the marking for the magnetic snap, this is just for the holes. And as I'm doing this, I'm trying to make sure I don't cut any of the top stitching. Okay, once I have those punched out, I'm just gonna take my top piece here and just check, yep, it goes through all the holes perfectly, just like that. So now we wanna work on the magnetic snap part, which is the male part. And so we're gonna flip this over. So remember, this is gonna be the top of the flap where we have the decoration, and on the back is where the magnetic snap is gonna go. I'm gonna grab my seam ripper, and I'm just gonna seam rip very gently and slowly along those slit marks. And then I'm going to take the backing piece of my design and I'm going to lay that over the 3 holes and insert my magnetic snap prong, and this is all on the back side of the flap, and flip this over. And then I'm going to take my washer and I'm going to put my washer over. Now remember, this is the top side where the design is going to go. And then I'm just going to push down the prongs on the magnetic snap. I'm going to push them in towards one another. And then I'm going to grab the pretty part of this little unit and I'm going to apply that over the back side of my magnetic snap and through those holes. And it should line up with the 3 holes on your backing piece here. And then let's just grab our screws and work on putting our screws in now. And be gentle with these because sometimes these screws can be a little delicate. And if you kind of fight them too much, you'll strip them. And then they won't work anymore, so don't do that. But they should just screw right into place. And if you have any really bulky areas, you can always just kind of pound those down with a hammer. Just smush it down so you can get this screw into place. And there you go. Now you have your magnetic snap in place. Isn't that cool? It looks so cool on one side, and on the back side, just a magnetic snap. I thought this was really cool. I never used something like this before. And it is a large one for the flap size, but you can make it work. And if you have plenty of material, if you wanted to widen the flap a little bit, you can to get the design to be the way you want it to. You have a lot of wiggle room here. Okay, so now we're going to install the other magnetic snap. So the first thing you want to do is grab your exterior main panel, and if you have the template, you'll see that there is a folding line. Otherwise, the pattern does give you measurements for how far down the folding line is. So then using the pattern piece or the measurements that are given in the pattern, mark down on the wrong side from the top edge of your exterior main panels and just mark the placement for those folding lines. And then using one of these as the front main panel, decide if you have a pattern or something you want to use, decide on that now. because you're gonna find the center along this folding line and measure 1 inch down and just mark a placement dot. Now this is where we're gonna put our female end of our magnetic snap. And if you want, what you can do is just take your flap, find the, spot for the male end here, line that up with the mark there, and just make sure it's centered. As long as this is centered, you're fine. If you feel like it needs to move over a little bit, go ahead and do that. So what you can do here, to make it easier, I'm gonna go ahead and find the midpoint on the top edge of this here, and I'm gonna mark the midpoint on the top edge of my panel, and this is again the back side of my main panel, my main front panel, and then just find the midpoint along the top edge of my flap here. And now I'm gonna line these up, and I'm just gonna push down so that the male end of that magnetic snap is pushing against the back of my main panel. And that's gonna let me see right here, this is the spot where that male magnetic snap is. And as long as it runs along that midpoint line, you're fine. If it's a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, well, just remember that whenever you're up here marking placement, just move it a little bit to the left or move it a little bit to the right. So now I'm gonna take the washer for the magnetic snap, and I have just a little scrap piece of my wax canvas because it is so stiff. It works great as stabilizer. So I'm just going to lay this over that, and I'm gonna mark where the prongs go for that. And I'm just gonna lay this over the dot that I marked. And remember, this dot is 1 inch down, centered along this line. And then I'm gonna mark the spots for the prongs. And then we can grab our seam ripper and just rip right along these slits. And now we're gonna flip over our front main panel. And from the right side, we're gonna insert the female end of the magnetic snap, flip it over, take your scrap or your stabilizer, insert that over the prongs, and then take your washer, insert that over the prongs, and then spread out your prongs. And whenever I have little prongs like this, I like to grab a piece of duct tape, just a small piece, and just cover them with the duct tape so that those metal bars don't rub against the lining over time. So there you go. If you see your fold mark over here, you can actually fold that down, because in the end, this is how it's going to kind of come out, just like that. Isn't that cute? I love this. So while we're here, so I don't forget, I'm actually gonna add one of my OklaRoots bag tags. I'm just going to add this about 1 inch down from the center of my magnetic snap. So looking at the center of the magnetic snap, I can just measure 1 inch down, and that's where I'm gonna put my tag. And I always like to use just a little piece of double-sided tape on the back of this. Double-sided tape doesn't work so great with wax canvas, but it should hold it just enough to get it from my table to the sewing machine. Once I have that about where I want it, I'm just gonna top stitch along all 4 edges of my tag at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now grab your 2 main panels, your 2 handles, and your flap. We're gonna attach all these to the top now. Okay, so let's start with the front panel. The front panel is just gonna be the main panel and 1 handle, that's it. So we mark in 1 inch from each side, and then the left side of the handle is going to line up with that 1 inch mark over here on the left, and use some clips to hold that in place. Now, I like to sew this down before I move the other one because it is so stiff, but I will show you, we're gonna end up pulling this up so that the right side of the handle matches up with that 1 inch mark on the right. And if you want, you can clip that in place, or if it's fighting you too much, then don't worry about clipping it right now. Just move it once you get to the sewing machine. But you're going to sew it down just like this. And we're gonna sew along this top edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so that's the front panel. So for the back panel, you're gonna still have the 1 inch marks from each of the edges, but you also need to make sure you mark the midpoint along the top edge here. So we're gonna do the strap the same way, where we have the left edge lining up with that left mark, and the right edge coming up over here lining up with the right mark. But you also need to make sure you take your flap, flip it so it's upside down. So the back side of the flap, or for me I have the magnetic snap, is going to be facing up. And remember, this is the right side of the exterior back panel, and you're gonna center this flap on that center midpoint mark. So I'll get this all clipped together to show you how it looks. And if you look in the pattern, they also have a picture of how this should end up. So we have one handle like that, flip up the other handle. So the back panel should look just like this, and we're gonna sew along this top edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I just want you to see how this is gonna work when you end up folding along that folded bit over there. Isn't that cute? This will come down and wrap around the front, so I'll show you. It's like this. See? Isn't that cute? It's such a cute little bag. I love this bag, and I love this material. Okay, you can set these to the side for now. Now grab your interior open pocket panel, and you're gonna fold it in half, short edges together, wrong sides together. And you can press this with an iron if you'd like, or you can just use clips to press along the top edge. Now we're going to top stitch along this folded edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now grab one of your interior main panels and lay it right side up, and then grab your pocket and laying it right side up, just line it up along the sides and the bottom edges and use some clips to hold this in place. And then you can just baste along the sides and the bottom of the pocket at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have the pocket basted in place, grab the exterior back panel, and this is the one that has the flap on it, and you're going to take the lining panel here that has the pocket and lay it right side down, lining up the top edge where the pocket is not attached to the top edge where the straps and the handle are attached, and just clip these so the exterior and the lining are clipped right sides together. And now let's sew along this top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn in place, take the lining panel and fold it up, and you're going to just press it so that the seam is behind the lining panel. So you're not pressing the seam down behind the exterior. And once you have this pressed in place, you're going to go ahead and top stitch right along the lining panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now make sure you have your fold line still marked, and you're going to fold your exterior panel wrong sides together just like that. And when you do that, the lining panel should just come and meet the bottom edge just like this. And then just grab some clips to hold this together so the lining and the exterior are now wrong sides together. And now you can baste along the edges in the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, you have the back panel done. We're pretty much going to just repeat that for the front panel now. So take your exterior front panel and lay it right side up, and then take the remaining lining panel and lay it right side down, lining up the top edges and clip together. And now let's sew along this top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And now fold the lining right side up, and then finger press along that seam. And then let's top stitch right along the lining panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Remember, the seam is behind the lining. Once you have that sewn in place, find your fold line and just fold the exterior wrong sides together along that fold line, lining up the bottom edge of the lining with the bottom edge of the exterior. So your exterior and your lining are wrong sides together, and just clip along the sides and the bottom. All right, now let's baste along the sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So finally, we're going to top stitch along the top fold here. So you're gonna have to move the handles out of the way, and just along this top fold on each of these panels, so the front and the back panels, top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, your front and back panels are now done. You can set these to the side. So now let's work on our strap connectors. So grab your 2 strap connector cuts and your itty bitty little D-rings. And what we can do is just fold these in half, long sides together, and then open them back up, and then fold the long raw edges back to the wrong side to meet that midpoint mark. And I know it's very skinny, but this material actually makes it very easy. I mean, you see, I don't have to use tape or anything. I just fold it. So do this for both your strap connectors. And now the pattern's gonna have you top stitch just a little bit on the center because we will top stitch this more on the bag in a minute. I'm not going to top stitch it at all right now. I'm just going to top stitch on the bag. So it really just depends on your material. Since my material is so stiff, once I have this around the D-ring and then I sew it in, I'm not going to have to worry about any of this unraveling. So I'm just going to attach it to the D-ring just like this. So I'm sliding the D-ring on and then wrapping it around so that the back edges come together. And I'll grab a clip just to hold it. Do this for both D-rings. And now let's sew along the raw edges down here at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those edges sewn, set this to the side. Now grab your exterior base panel and mark the midpoints on the short edges and the midpoints also on the long edges. Now, keeping your base panel right side up, grab your little strap connectors here, and you're gonna just center them right on the midpoint of the short edges of your base panel. And so do that for both sides. And now we're just going to top stitch these in place at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're just going to top stitch them along the sides and then right underneath the D-ring. So now take your exterior base panel and your lining base panel. And on your lining base panel, also mark the midpoints on the short edges and the long edges. And now take your base panel and lay it right side up, and then take your lining panel and lay it right side down so the right sides together, and then match up the midpoints on the short edges and clip together. And you're going to do this for the other side as well. The lining panel is shorter than the base panel, the exterior base panel, so it should bow like this. Now we're going to sew along both short edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have these sewn, flip the base panel so that they are wrong sides together, and then push the seam allowance so it's behind the lining, and you're going to top stitch right along the lining at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do this for both sides. Once you have this top stitched, you're going to straighten this out and flatten it out. And your goal here is to make sure the midpoint on the lining matches up with the midpoints on the exterior. And you might need to use like a small ruler or something to help you line this up, but just get all those midpoints lined up first, and then you can kind of push this down and press it so it's completely flat. So this has, you know, a fold just like the main panels have folds. There we go. So once you have this nice and flat, the next step is using a bunch of glue, because we're going to pretty much just glue this panel in place. We can't really sew it in place like this. We have to just leave it as it is, but we don't want it moving around on us. So I'm just going to take my glue and I'm just going to run it along the long edges right underneath the lining on both sides, and then I'm going to let that dry before moving on to the next step. So once the glue dries, take your main front panel and lay it right side up. And then take your base panel and you're going to lay it right side, exterior right side down, so that the folded edge comes up on the same side as the folded edge on the front panel, and line up the right side over here and clip together. I like to flip this over so that I can see the lining side here, because what you're going to want to do is measure 3/8 of an inch up from the bottom edge of your front panel on the side that you're going to be sewing, and then just use a marking tool to make a mark there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew along this clipped edge. So you see here's the other side like this. So we're going to start at the top and we're going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way until we get to that 3/8 of an inch mark on the bottom. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alright, so now flip up this side panel just like that and wrap around your base so that the other side comes up to the left side now of the front panel, and match up the top corners. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark on the bottom right corner here 3/8 of an inch up from the bottom, just like I did on the other side. And then I'm going to clip my base panel to the side, and depending on the type of material you're using, you might kind of have to wrestle it a little bit. Just don't be afraid to, you know, fold it, crease it. Remember, you're going to have to turn this whole bag out in the end anyways, so it's going to get wrinkly. You're going to have the opportunity to smooth it out in the very end. So don't worry about keeping everything perfectly smooth or flat right now. All right, so once you have the side clipped, we're going to sew along the side at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, stop at your 3/8 inch mark on the bottom here, backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, so this is when you're going to start wrestling it. So once you have the sides done, now we need to do the bottom. So like I said, let it get wrinkly. It's going to be okay. If you have the midpoint marked on the bottom, this should be pretty easy. Just match the midpoint up of the bottom with the midpoint on your base panel. And just use your clips to clip these together. And now we're going to sew along this bottom clipped edge here to 3/8 inch seam allowance. You might find this easier to sew it from the back of your lining on your main panel, because you're just going to start and stop where the stitches stopped on the sides here. So once again, you're going to start 3/8 of an inch from the sides and just backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, so now you should have one panel sewn onto the base and the sides. And now we're just going to repeat that with the other panel. So this is our back panel here, so lay your back panel right side up and then flip your unit right side down. And we're going to do the same thing by attaching one side at a time and then doing the bottom. So I'm just going to start with the right side over here. And then once again going to mark the 3/8 inch stopping point on the back side of my main panel. Now, this is when you do start really wrestling with this bag. So if you need to, if it's giving you a hard time, especially with this material, grab a hairdryer and heat it up. If you heat up the material, it becomes much more loosey-goosey, and you can just smush it the way you need to. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end, and also making sure you stop at that mark on the bottom here. Don't go all the way down to the very end. All right, once one side is done, let's repeat that for the other side. So I'm going to work on the left side of the panel. I'm just going to line up the top edges and clip together. And then once again on the bottom corner, I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch up from the bottom edge on the unsewn side and just make a mark. And now I'm going to go sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and the end, and stopping again at that mark. All right, now we have the sides done. We just have to do the bottom. So once again, line up the midpoint marks and just clip these bottom edges together. And if you're having a hard time, remember this is a structured bag, so you can kind of restructure it from the inside, and just take your time. All right, once you have that clipped, let's go sew along this bottom edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure you start and stop 3/8 of an inch from the edges. All right, now probably the hardest part of the whole bag. You need to turn it right side out. So before you do that, if you have some fraying like I do, you might want to just trim that down. It's going to probably fray a little bit more as you're turning it out, but it's easier to clean this up now than it is to clean it up later. Once the bag's turned out, it's going to be harder to get in there and trim down the fraying. All right, and now just gently and slowly work on turning this bag right side out. Again, if it's really, really hard, get a hairdryer, heat it up, and it'll become a lot easier to turn. All right, as you turn this out, just gently poke out all the corners. We still have a little bit more work to do, so you're not done yet, but I would say the hardest part is done. I don't find the next part to be terribly challenging, and the next part is what really gives this bag its cool look. So right now it's just kind of like a little basic grocery tote. Now we're gonna make it fancy. So this time we're gonna start on the bottom. So looking at the bottom, you're gonna push the seam so it comes below the contrast. So you see I can press the seam so that the exterior goes down. What I want is the contrast to actually come up. So I'm pressing the seam just behind the contrast material so that we have this little like frame coming on the bottom here. And again, if you're using this wax canvas, it's stiff, but I mean, it stays. It's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about it. So push that and then get the other side out of the way. We're not playing with that right now. And then just manipulate those corners how you want them. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're gonna top stitch right along the contrasting panel. And you're just gonna go from corner to corner. You can see a little crease here where the seam is in the corners. Just one corner to the other. I do like to back stitch at the beginning and the end of these stitches. All right, so we have the bottom done. Now we're gonna do the sides the same way. So we're just gonna do the front first and then the back. So the sides, the same thing. The seam goes behind the contrast panel, not behind the main panel. And if you need to, you can trim down some of the bulk up here at the top. So for example, so if it's just way too bulky up here at the top, you can trim, I'm just gonna trim one part, so like the contrast seam down just a little bit, just to reduce some of that bulk. But I don't wanna trim the entire seam down because the seam is what's giving me my guidelines right here for how we're gonna fold this. So just wrap it around the seam. You can use clips if you need to. Honestly, with this material, you probably don't need to, but I'll use them anyways. Okay. And then once again, we're gonna just move the rest of the material out of the way, and we're gonna top stitch on the contrasting edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I do like to back stitch the beginning and the end and stop once you get to this little corner down here where you can see the fold of the seam. So you see how this is coming together? Let's just look at it real quick. You see how by stitching it down like that would create this really beautiful clean frame, and it provides perfect structure. It's not this like kind of floppy loosey-goosey bag. So once again, I'm gonna reach in here and I'm trimming down the seam that's on the side panel here, just to help reduce some bulk. And once I have that trimmed down a bit, I'm just gonna reach in and push the seam behind the contrasting panel on the side. Use clips if necessary. And just gently wrap the material around that seam. And now we're just gonna top stitch right along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So you see how this looks versus the back here. So now I'm just gonna repeat all 3 of those steps on the back panel, starting with the base and then doing the sides. It's exactly the same as the front panel, so I'm not gonna walk you through it, but I'll do it off camera. Alrighty, once you have it all sewn, just take a look everywhere, get it all cleaned up. And grab your snap and bring it to the front. How cute is this little guy? It's just the cutest little bag. All right, so the bag is done. Now we just have to make the strap, which is gonna be super easy. Now, I will show you, this is my favorite strap. This is just my favorite strap design, I think, of all time. This is from a pattern that we've done previously on the channel, and I have a link up above, and I'll have a link down below as well, so you can go straight to it. I'm not gonna be walking you through how to make this strap, because I have already done that on another one, and it's not part of the pattern. However, I do love the way this turns out, and if you have the kit this month, you have plenty of material to build a strap like this. But I'm gonna show you how to build the strap using just the water-resistant canvas. So for this strap, I'm going to enlist the help of my iron. I'm also not really doing it the way the pattern suggests, just because I'm just going to do a basic crossbody strap. So remember, my strap is 3 inches wide, so I can have a finished strap that is 3/4 of an inch wide. So I'm just going to fold my strap in half, long sides together, wrong sides together, and press. And you can use your iron to press this, or you can just finger press it depending on your material. If you're using quilt cotton, you definitely want to press it with an iron. If you're using a water-resistant canvas, you can usually get away with just using your fingers. Then once you have it pressed in half, you're going to open it back up and then press the long edges back, wrong sides together, to meet that midpoint. And for this one, I do usually use an iron to help with it. Just find it goes a little quicker with the iron. So once you do one side pressed back, do the same thing with the other side. Just so you have both edges, both long edges pressed wrong sides together to meet in the middle. All right, and then once you have both folded, you're just gonna fold the whole thing in half, hot dog style, and this is when I use clips. So making these types of straps just takes a little while. So you're more than welcome to use webbing here. All right, once you have it all folded and clipped, let's take this to the sewing machine and we're just gonna top stitch along all the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so the remainder of the strap is going to be done with just rivets and tools, which is how I prefer to do straps. So take your sewn strap and you're going to insert it from the bottom of the slider, the connector here, up over that middle bar and then back around. And since we do have raw edges on the bottom of our strap, I do like to fold it once by about 3/4 of an inch and then fold it down again, just like that. So that way I have no raw edges showing. And then I'm going to grab my hole punch. I'm going to reset this so it's not on the biggest hole. And then I'm just going to punch a hole centered right below the slider and then grab a rivet and insert a rivet here. And I'll just take my rivet press and press this rivet into place. Now take your little swivel hooks and with the strap, with the back side up, so the folded over edge is facing up, straighten out your strap, take a swivel hook and lay it so that the hook part is down and the straight bar part is up, and just thread it on your strap. And then keep your strap nice and straight while you bring it together, and you're gonna slide up the raw edge of your strap over the edge where the fold over is, and then pull it up a bit, and then back over through that bar, just like that. So now you should have a hook on one side, and then the slider in the center, and then a raw edge remaining. Take your remaining hook, and then just slide it on so that it's facing on the right side. Flip this over, and once again, I'm going to fold the raw edge 3/4 of an inch down, and then fold it once again, so that all raw edges are nice and hidden and tucked away. And then I'll just pop a hole in this. Grab my remaining rivet, push my rivet through there to hold all the layers in place. And then press it with my rivet press. And now your strap is done. So now you have your bag and you have your strap, and I forgot to include this tag. I do apologize. My preference for the tag is actually just right here in the lining, right below the flap here. That's where I prefer to put this tag. If I could somehow install it in there, I might just glue it so it's like super glued in there. But I did forget to sew it on. I will have a little pop-up reminding you to sew it on there in the video, but I just forgot. But that's where I prefer to put the tag. I think that's a beautiful spot for it. So you can just close this up, and then here are our little D-rings. You can attach our strap to our D-rings, and then there you go. Most adorable little bag ever, all ready to go. All right, guys, here's the one we just finished up. Tell me what you think. Remember, I told you I forgot to add the tag. What I did with the tag actually over here is I just put some glue on the back of it and I riveted on the side. It's still cute. It is best if you sew these tags on, but in a pinch, it'll do. It still looks adorable. So I forgot to show you what this bag looks like on in the beginning of the video, so I'm gonna go ahead and just let this go further down. I don't have my little step stool anymore, so I'm on my tippy toes. But you see, it is a small bag. Can you see it down there? It's a small bag. I think it's perfect. Honestly, as a mom taking kids trick-or-treating, I feel like this is a great trick-or-treating bag. Maybe I'll have like a little tiny bottle of wine in here. You know they sell like those little bottles of wine, little bottle of wine, a couple of like beef jerky or something like that, a little bit of treats, you know, so while I'm like taking the kids out, I can, you know, relax and also have energy all night long while I'm also carrying their bags and bags of candy. But besides that, this is a great bag for gifting, especially to go into the holiday season. If you want, you can just remove the strap, and I think just carrying it as its little handles here is a very chic look. It would look very cute going to a holiday party, just going to any sort of like little get together. It is a very adorable shape, and I think this is also a bag that would be a great gift for teens, young adults, preteens, things like that, because it is a very trendy look. In my opinion, it's a very trendy look. So I hope you love making this little cute bag as much as I do. If you make one of these and you post it on social media, make sure you tag me. I want to see your version. I want to see what kind of material you're using. I want to see the colors that you went with. If you're using the Bag Making Bee Club, again, tag me. Let me know what you think of the firmer wax canvas. Personally, when I first opened it up and I looked at it, I was like, oh no, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sew with this. And then as I worked with it, I was like, okay, it's actually not that hard. And I am sewing it on a domestic machine. I would consider my machine a little bit more semi-industrial versus just domestic. So you do need to be smart with your needles. You need to be careful with your tension, things like that, which is again why we say this is more an advanced beginner or intermediate make. But I personally love this material, and I would use it again and again because it's just more material I don't have to add interfacing to, and I'm just so lazy when it comes to interfacing. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye guys. Thank you so much for watching today's tutorial. I hope that you are inspired to go make something and have a lot of fun with these patterns. If you're not already subscribed, please make sure you click subscribe down below. Also make sure you hit that little bell, the little notification bell. That's gonna make sure you're notified every single time we have a new video or when we go live. For even more fun content from OklaRoots, make sure you're following us on Facebook and Instagram. We do daily stories over there, which include unboxing, talks about books, other little mini tutorials, lots and lots of discussion over all kinds of things going on. You can also find us on TikTok and also on Reels for even more fun, kind of more random content. And if you really want to dive in for some behind the scenes content, free gifts, access to shop items before anybody else, and influence on upcoming videos, make sure you go check out OklaRoots over on Patreon. We have a lot going on over there, and it's a fun place to hang out, and you are directly supporting the OklaRoots YouTube channel. These videos could not be possible without the help of my patrons. So thank you so much to everybody over there. Thank you again for watching today's tutorial. I hope you enjoy the videos. Go make something.